Anti-Iranian sentiment, anti-Persian sentiment, or Iranophobia refers to feelings and expression of hostility, hatred, discrimination, or prejudice towards Iran and its culture, and towards persons based on their association with Iran and Iranian culture. Its opposite is Persophilia. Historically, prejudice against Iranians was prominent in the Arab world, particularly on the part of Arabs following the Muslim conquest of Persia. In the Arab world, Ajam. The word Ajam is derived from the root jam and refers to unclear, vague and or incomprehensible, as opposed to Arabi, which means clear, understandable, with perfect Arabic tongue. Ajam came to mean one who mumbles to refer to the Germans, and came to be applied especially to Persians. To Persian eyes and in Persian sources, the distinction of Arab and Ajam is already discernible in pre- and early Islamic literature cf. the Ajam Temtemi. In general, Ajam was a pejorative term, used by Arabs because of the contrived social and political superiority in early Islam. However, Arabic dictionaries state that the word Ajami is used for all non-Arabs, a term used by Ibn Khaldun in his Muqaddimah. Although in Arabic linguistic usage, the non-Arabs designated by the term Ajam are primarily Persians, and it is believed that Ibn Khaldun in speaking of Ajam had meant Persians. Other slurs. Arabs use slurs against Persians by calling them fire worshippers and Majus, which means Zoroastrians, Magi. Anti-Iranianism. In early Islamic period, Patrick Clausen states that the Iranians chafed under Umayyad rule. The Umayyads rose from traditional Arab aristocracy. They tended to marry other Arabs, creating an ethnic stratification that discriminated against Iranians. Even as Arabs adopted traditional Iranian bureaucracy, Arab tribalism disadvantaged Iranians. Many Arab Muslims believed that Iranian converts should not clothe themselves as Arabs, among many other forms of discrimination that existed. Muawiyah, in a famous letter addressed to Ziyad ibn Abih, the then governor of Iraq, wrote, "Be watchful of Iranian Muslims and never treat them as equals of Arabs. Arabs have a right to take in marriage their women, but they have no right to marry Arab women. Arabs are entitled to inherit the legacy, but they cannot inherit from an Arab. As far as possible they are to be given lesser pensions and lowly jobs. In the presence of an Arab, a non-Arab shall not lead the congregation prayer, nor they are to be allowed to stand in the first row of prayer, nor to be entrusted with the job of guarding the frontiers of the post of a Qadi. Mistreatment of Iranians and other non-Arabs during early period of Islam is well documented. Under the rule of Umayyads, although many of the mullahs employed by a patron enjoyed favorable position as equal to an Arab Muslim, they were generally victims of cultural bias and even sometimes considered to be of an equal footing of a slave. According to sources of the time, the mistreatment of mullahs was a general rule. They were denied any positions in the government under Umayyad rule. The Umayyad Arabs are even reported to have prevented the Mawali from having kunyas, as an Arab was only considered worthy of a kunya. They were required to pay taxes for not being an Arab. During the early centuries of Islam, when the Islamic Empire was really an Arab kingdom, the Iranians, Central Asians and other non-Arab peoples who had converted to Islam in growing numbers as Mawali or clients of an Arab lord or clan, had in practice acquired an inferior socio-economic and racial status compared to Arab Muslims, though the Mawali themselves fared better than the empire's non-Muslim subjects. The Ahl al-Dhimma, the Awali, for instance, paid special taxes often similar to the jizya and the kharaj levied on the Zoroastrians and other non-Muslim subjects, taxes which were never paid by the Arab Muslims. References in Persian literature. Zaringkub presents a lengthy discussion on the large flux and influence of the victorious Arabs on the literature, language, culture and society of Persia during the 2 centuries following the Islamic conquest of Persia in his book 2 Centuries of Silence. Suppression of Iranian languages. After the Islamic conquest of the Sassanid Empire, during the reign of the Umayyad dynasty, the Arab conquerors imposed Arabic as the primary language of the subject peoples throughout their empire. Not happy with the prevalence of the Iranian languages in the Divan, Hajjaj ibn Yusuf ordered the official language of the conquered lands to be replaced by Arabic, sometimes by force. According to Biruni, when Qutayba bin Muslim under the command of al-Hajjaj bin Yusuf was sent to Khwarezmia with a military expedition and conquered it for the second time, he swiftly killed whomever wrote the Khwarezmian native language that knew of the Khwarezmian history, science and culture. He then killed all the Zoroastrian priests and burned and wasted the books, until gradually the illiterate only remained, who knew nothing of writing, and hence the history was mostly forgotten. It is difficult to imagine the Arabs not implementing anti-Persian policies in light of such events, writes Zaringkub in his famous 2 Centuries of Silence, where he exclusively writes of this topic. Reports of Persian speakers being tortured are also given in Al-Aghani. Shia Islam and Iranians, predominantly Shia Iran, has always exhibited a sympathetic side for Ali and his progeny. Even when Persia was largely Sunni, this was still evident, as can be seen from the writings remaining from that era. Rumi, for example, praises Ali in a section entitled Learn from Ali. It recounts Ali ibn Abi Talib's explanation as to why he declined to kill someone who had spit in his face as Ali was defeating him in battle. Persian literature in praise of Ali's progeny is quite ubiquitous and abundant. These all stem from numerous traditions regarding Ali's favor of Persians being as equals to Arabs. Several early Shiite sources speak of a dispute arising between an Arab and an Iranian woman, referring the case to Ali for arbitration. Ali reportedly did not allow any discrimination between the two to take place. His judgment thus invited the protest of the Arab woman. Thereupon, Ali replied, "In the Qur and I did not find the progeny of Ishmael to be any higher than the Iranians." In another such tradition, Ali was once reciting a sermon in the city of Kufa, when Ash'ar ibn Qais, a commander in the Arab army, protested, "Amir al-Mu'minin, these Iranians are excelling the Arabs right in front of your eyes and you are doing nothing about it." Quote, he then roared, "I will show them who the Arabs are." Ali immediately retorted, "While fat Arabs rest in soft beds, the Iranians work hard on the hottest days to please God with their efforts. And what do these Arabs want from me? To ostracize the Iranians and become an oppressor. I swear by the God that splits the nucleus and creates man. I heard the Prophet once say, just as you strike the Iranians with your swords in the name of Islam, so will the Iranians one day strike you back the same way for Islam." When the Sassanid city of Anbar fell to the forces of Muawiyah, news reached Ali that the city had been sacked and plundered, spilling much innocent blood. Early Shiite sources report that Ali gathered all the people of Kufa to the mosque and gave a fiery sermon. After describing the massacre, he said, "If somebody hearing this news now faints and dies of grief, I fully approve of it." Quote, it is from here that Ali is said to have had more sympathy for Iranians, while author S. Nuruddin Abtahi claims that Umar highly resented them. However, a hadith on Ali's banning of the game of Shatranj narrates that Ali said, "Chess is the gambling game of the Ajam." Modern times. It was in Baghdad where the first Arab nationalists, mainly of Palestinian and Syrian descent, formed the basis of their overall all philosophies. Prominent among them were individuals such as Muhammad Amin al-Husseini and Syrian nationalists such as Shukri al-Kuwatli and Jamil Mardam. Sati al-Hushri, who served as advisor to the Ministry of Education and later as Director General of Education and Dean of the College of Law, was particularly instrumental in shaping the Iraqi educational system. Other prominent Pan-Arabists were Michel Aflaq and Keralat Alfa, as well as Sati al-Hushri, Salah al-Din al-Bitta, Zaki al-Arsuzi and Sami Shkat. These individuals formed the nucleus and genesis of true Pan-Arabism. Sati al-Hushri's campaigns against schools suspected of being positive towards Persia are well documented. One dramatic example is found in the 1920s when the Iraqi Ministry of Education ordered Hushri to appoint Muhammad al-Jawahiri as a teacher in a Baghdad school. A short excerpt of Hushri's interview with the teacher is revealing. Hushri: First, I want to know your nationality. Jawahiri: I am an Iranian. Hushri: In that case we cannot appoint you. Saddam Hussein Abdel-Majid al-Takriti forced out tens of thousands of people of Persian origin from Iraq in the 1970s, after having been accused of being spies for Iran and Israel. Today, many of them live in Iran. Iran-Iraq War. Early on in his career, Saddam Hussein and Pan-Arab ideologues targeted the Arabs of southwest Iran in an endeavor to have them separate and join the Arab nation. Hussein made no effort to conceal Arab nationalism in his war against Iran. An intense campaign of propaganda during his reign meant that many schoolchildren were taught that Iran provoked Iraq into invading and that the invasion was fully justified. Yellow Revolution, Yellow Wind, Yellow Storm were thrown as slurs by Saddam Hussein against Iran due to Hulagu's 1258 sack of Baghdad during the Mongol Wars, and the terms Persian and Elamites were also used by Saddam as insults. On the 2nd of April 1980, a half-year before the outbreak of the war, Saddam Hussein visited Al-Mustanziri University in Baghdad. By drawing parallels to the 7th century defeat of Persia in the Battle of Al-Qadisiyah, he announced, "In your name, brothers, and on behalf of the Iraqis and Arabs everywhere, we tell those cowards who try to avenge Al-Qadisiyah that the spirit of Al-Qadisiyah as well as the blood and honor of the people of Al-Qadisiyah, who carried the message on the spearheads, are greater than their attempts." Saddam also accused Iranians of murdering the 2nd, 3rd and 4th caliphs of Islam, invading the 3 islands of Abu Musa and Greater and Lesser Tubs in the Persian Gulf, and attempting to destroy the Arabic language and civilization. In the war, Iraq made extensive use of chemical weapons against Iranian troops and civilians as well as Iraqi Kurds. Iran expected a condemnation by UN of this act and sent allegation to UN. At time the UN Security Council issued statements that chemical weapons had been used in the war. Quote, However, in these UN statements Iraq was not mentioned by name, so that the situation is viewed as, in a way, the international community remained silent as Iraq used weapons of mass destruction against Iranian as well as Iraqi Kurds, and it is believed that the United States had prevented UN from condemning Iraq. In December 2006, Hussein said he would take responsibility with honor for any attacks on Iran using conventional or chemical weapons during the 1980 to 1988 war, but he took issue with charges he ordered attacks on Iraqis. On the execution day, Hussein said, "I spent my whole life fighting the infidels and the intruders. I destroyed the invaders and the Persians." Quote. He also stressed that the Iraqis should fight the Americans and the Persians. Movaffaq al-Rubai, Iraq's national security advisor, who was a witness to Hussein's execution, described him as repeatedly repeatedly shouting, "Down with Persians." Hussein built an anti-Iranian monument called Hands of Victory in Baghdad in 1989 to commemorate his declaration of victory over Iran in the Iran-Iraq War. After his fall, it was reported that the new Iraqi government had organized the Committee for Removing Symbols of the Saddam Era and that the Hands of Victory monument had begun to be dismantled. However, the demolition was later halted. Some Arab states show hostility to Iran. Al-Salafi magazine, quoted in the Times, states, "Iran has become more dangerous than Israel itself. The Iranian Revolution has come to renew the Iranian presence in our region. This is the real clash of civilizations." In January 2007, Saudi Arabian King Abdullah said that attempts to convert Muslim Sunnis to the Shia branch of Islam would not succeed and that Sunnis would always make up the majority of the world's Muslims. Although Abdullah did not mention Iran by name, his comments appeared to be aimed at easing Arab concerns over the Shia nation's growing influence in the Middle East. "We are following up on this matter and we are aware of the dimensions of spreading Shiism and where it has reached," Abdullah told the Kuwaiti Al-Siyasa Daily. However, "we believe that this process will not achieve its goal because the majority of Sunni Muslims will never change the faith," he added. "Ultimately, the majority of Muslims seems immune to any attempts by other sects to penetrate it or diminish its historical power. While there have been no specific examples of Iranians trying to convert Sunnis, Arabs fear such conversions would accompany Iran's growing powers." Al-Qaeda has been increasingly singling out Iran and Shiites, describing the Persians as the enemy of Arabs and complicit in the occupation of Iraq. In the United States, according to the Public Affairs Alliance of Iranian Americans, nearly half of Iranian Americans surveyed in 2008 by Zogby International have themselves experienced or personally know another Iranian American who has experienced discrimination because of their ethnicity or country of origin. The most common types of discrimination reported are airport security, social discrimination, employment or business discrimination, racial profiling and discrimination at the hands of immigration officials. The Iranian hostage crisis of the U.S. Embassy in Tehran in November 1979 precipitated a wave of anti-Iranian sentiment in the United States, directed both against the new Islamic regime and Iranian nationals and immigrants. Even though such sentiments gradually declined after the release of the hostages at the start of 1981, they sometimes flare up. In response, some Iranian immigrants to the U.S. have distanced themselves from the nationality and instead identify primarily on the basis of their ethnic or religious affiliations. Hollywood's depiction of Persians and Iranians. Since the 1980s and especially since the 1990s, Hollywood's depiction of Iranians has vilified Iranians as in television programs such as 24, John Doe, On Wings of Eagles, and Escape from Iran, the Canadian caper, which was based on a true story. Critics maintain that Hollywood's tall walls of exclusion and discrimination have yet to crumble when it comes to the movie industry's persistent misrepresentation of Iranians and their collective identity. Not Without My Daughter. The 1991 film Not Without My Daughter was criticized for its portrayal of Iranian society. Filmed in Israel, it was based on the Pulitzer-nominated autobiography by Betty Mahmoudi. In the book and film, an American woman traveled to Tehran with her young daughter to visit her Iranian-born family of her husband. Mahmoudi's husband then undergoes a strange transformation in Iran, ranging from an uneducated and sophisticated citizen to an abusive, backwards peasant, eventually deciding that they will not return to the United States. Betty is told that she can divorce him and leave, but the daughter must stay in Tehran under Islamic law. Ultimately, after 18 months in Iran, Betty and her daughter escape to the American embassy in Turkey. Several Western critics, including Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times and Karen James of the New York Times, criticized the film for stereotyping Iranians as misogynistic and fanatical. According to Ebert, the film depicts Islamic society in shrill terms, where women are willing or unwilling captives of the men, deprived of what in the West would be considered basic human rights. Furthermore, Ebert says no attempt is made, deliberately, I assume, to explain the Muslim point of view, except in rigid sets of commands and rote statements. Ebert then contends, if a movie of such a vitriolic and spiteful nature were to be made in America about any other ethnic group, it would be denounced as racist and prejudice. According to Jane Campbell, the film only serves to reinforce the media stereotype of Iranians as terrorists who, if not actively bombing public buildings or holding airline passengers hostage, are untrustworthy, are irrational, cruel, and barbaric. The film was also criticized in Iran. A 2002 Islamic Republic news agency article claimed that the film smears against Iran and stereotyped Iranians as cruel characters and wife-beaters. In a Finnish documentary, Without My Daughter, filmmaker Alexis Kouros tells Mahmoudi's husband's side of the story, showing Iranian eyewitnesses accusing the Hollywood film of spreading lies and treasons. Alice Sharif, an American woman living with her Iranian husband in Tehran, accuses Mahmoudi and the filmmakers of deliberately attempting to foment anti-Iranian sentiment in the United States. Alexander. The 2004 film Alexander by American director Oliver Stone has been accused of negative and inaccurate portrayal of Persians. The 2007 film 300, an adaptation of Frank Miller's 1998 graphic novel, was criticized for its racist portrayal of combatants in the Persian army at the Battle of Thermopylae. Reviewers in the United States and elsewhere noted the political overtones of the West against Iran storyline and the way Persians are depicted as decadent, sexually flamboyant and evil in contrast to the noble Greeks, with bootleg versions of the film already available in Tehran. With the film's international release and news of the film's surprising success at the U.S. box office, it prompted widespread anger in Iran. Izada Moavani of Time reported, all of Tehran was outraged. Everywhere I went yesterday, the talk vibrated with indignation over the film. Newspapers in Iran featured headlines such as Hollywood declares war on Iranians and 300 against 70 million. No, an independent Iranian newspaper, said that he film depicts Iranians as demons without culture, feeling or humanity, who think of nothing except attacking other nations and killing people. 4 Iranian members of parliament have called for Muslim countries to ban the film, and a group of Iranian filmmakers submitted a letter of protest to UNESCO regarding the film's alleged misrepresentation of Iranian history and culture. Iran's cultural advisor to President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad has called the film an American attempt for psychological warfare against Iran. Moavani identified 2 factors which may have contributed to the intensity of Iranian indignation over the film. First, she describes the timing of the film's release, on the eve of Nowruz, the Persian New Year, as inauspicious. Second, Iranians tend to view the era depicted in the film as a particularly noble page in the history. Moavani also suggests that the box office success of 300, compared with the relative flop of Alexander, is cause for considerable alarm, signaling ominous U.S. intentions. According to The Guardian, Iranian critics of 300, ranging from bloggers to government officials, have described the movie as a calculated attempt to demonize Iran at a time of intensifying U.S. pressure over the country's nuclear program. An Iranian government spokesman described the film as hostile behavior which is the result of cultural and psychological warfare. Moavani reported that the Iranians she interacted with were adamant that the movie was secretly funded by the U.S. government to prepare Americans for going to war against Iran. Dana Stevens of Slate states, "If 300, the new battle epic based on the graphic novel by Frank Miller and Lynn Varley, had been made in Germany in the mid-1930s, it would be studied today alongside The Eternal Jew as a textbook example of how race-baiting fantasy and nationalist myth can serve as an incitement to total war. Since it's a product of the post-ideological, post-textbook 21st century, 300 will instead be talked about as a technical achievement, the next blip on the increasingly blurry line between movies and video games." The Netherlands. The requests of the Ministry of Education and Foreign Affairs of the Netherlands to monitor Iranian students has led to a situation that Iranian students cannot study at the University of Twente in the city of Enschede and Eindhoven University of Technology in the city of Eindhoven. The latter university had even asked the AIVD to monitor the Iranian students. AIVD stated that it was not their duty to do this, and the university has decided to stop admitting any applicants from Iran no matter what degree they are seeking. The reason provided by the Dutch government is that it fears the theft of sensitive nuclear technology that could assist the Iranian government in constructing nuclear weapons. After protests were lodged, the Dutch government announced again that the Iranian students and the Dutch citizens of Iranian heritage are not allowed to study at many Dutch universities, and some areas in the Netherlands are off-limits to them. Additionally, several other universities stated that the government had prohibited them from admitting students from Iran, and technical colleges weren't to allow Iranian students access to knowledge of nuclear technology. It was noted that this was the first time after the German occupation during the Second World War that ethnic, religion or racial-based restrictions were imposed in this part of Europe. Harry van Bommel, a parliamentarian of the Dutch Socialist Party, condemned this berufsverbod, deliberately using a German word which is associated with the Second World War. Although the Dutch authorities state that the UN Security Council's Resolution 1737 authorizes them and obliges all member states of the UN to take such a measure, the Netherlands remains the only country to have done so. On the 3rd of February 2010, a court in The Hague ruled that the Dutch government's policy to ban Iranian-born students and scientists from certain master's degrees and from nuclear research facilities is overly broad and a violation of an international civil rights treaty. Turkey. According to a 2013 survey, 75% of Turks looked Iran unfavorably against 14% with favorable views. Political scientist Shireen Hunter writes that there are two significant groups in Turkey that are hostile towards Iran: the military establishment and the ultra-Kemalist elite, and the ultra-nationalists with pan-Turkist aspirations. Canadian author Kaveh Farooq also suggests that pan-Turkist groups have encouraged anti-Iranian sentiments. Historically, the Shia Muslims were discriminated in the Ottoman Empire as they were associated with their Iranian, Persian neighbors. In Turkey, relatively large communities of Turks, Kurds and Zazas are Alevi Shia, while some areas in eastern Anatolia, notably Kars and Agri, are 12 Shia. Azerbaijan. according to political advisor Eldar Mamedov. Anti-Iranian policies carried out by various Azerbaijani governments since the 1990s. Azerbaijan's second president Abul Fazlkebei and his government has been widely described as pursuing pan-Turkic and anti-Iranian policies. Armenia. According to a July 2007 poll in Armenia, Iran is viewed largely as an important partner, rather than a political and economic threat. According to a 2013 poll, the overwhelming majority of respondents opposed women marrying Iranians. In contrast, a slight majority approved doing business with Iranians. International polls.